Over, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. And talking of good work, we move on to item number 11, which is now coming back for the 700th time. No, I'm just joking. It just feels a little bit like it. Our wonderful staff who've been working through the complexities around our funding for the Citizens Advice Bureaus in the Auckland region. And I want to acknowledge, I think we have with us ACAB, representatives from ACAB. Thank you for coming, and thank you again for the work. I think many of us understand that this is not always easy, so we appreciate your, we just appreciate you, full stop. Thank you. So can I hand over to the team?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name's Christine Olsen. I'm the manager of the Community Empowerment Unit. And with me today, I have Trudy Farver, who's been working on this funding model for the last 2 years, and Kylie Hill from the Community Empowerment Unit. I'd also like to specifically introduce you to the members from the ACAB board. We have Peter Taylor, who is the chair of the board, and Les Wills and Ralph Martin, who are also board members. So I have a very brief presentation, and then we can answer questions. So just want to remind you of the background of this work. It started back in 2016 when the Regional Strategy and Policy Committee at the time asked us to do a review of services and funding with a specific request to look to achieve greater equity and fairness, taking into consideration social issues in local communities. So we did that piece of work and we came up with a model that we felt addressed that as well as we could, and we brought that back to this committee a year ago, and at that committee we were asked to go away and do further work on the model jointly with ACAB. And that's what we're here today to bring back to you. So the report today seeks approval for the proposed new model, and it also asks the committee to refer an increase to the baseline grant of $200,000 per annum for the next 2 years for consideration by the Finance and Performance Committee. So the three models that we've considered and that we've provided as options are the current funding model, which is 100% population based and doesn't include the populations of Franklin or Great Barrier. The second model is the one that we brought to you a year ago, which was 70% population, 25% client usage and 5% deprivation. And it did include the population of Franklin, but not Great Barrier. And the model that we're recommending to you today is the one that we've developed jointly with the ACAB board, and it's 90% population and 10% deprivation, with including the population of Franklin. We have consulted with local boards, and 17 of the local boards support the new model, with 3 boards, Māngere, Otahuhu, Manurewa and Otara Papatoe, preferring that the deprivation component is 20% rather than 10%, and the Franklin local board specifically wanting it noted that they support the inclusion of the Franklin population in the funding model. Rodney and Upper Harbour didn't support the model, and Waiheke had no preference for the model but supported retaining the $200,000. So the $200,000 was given to ACAB this financial year as a one-off. ACAB also consulted with their local CAB Bureau, and the feedback that they got from the Bureau was that they support the retaining of the $200,000, and they support the next piece of work, which will look at assessing service gaps in future planning. They raised concerns about using deprivation in the model, and the added expectations from Council of the increase in funding. There were some concerns about the capacity of Bureau to develop new services, and particularly from the Rural Bureau, there was a concern that a population-based funding model doesn't take into account the complexity of their situation. We have worked, one of the things that we have applied in the development of this model is the Auckland Plan, particularly Focus Area 6 of belonging and participation, which has a focus on focusing investment to address disparities and serve communities of greatest need. So that's been one of our guiding things. The next piece of work, once we have got approval for this funding model, is to do what we're calling a network service provision framework. So that will be, over the next 18 months, we'll work with ACAB, looking in a lot more detail at how the service will grow and adapt in the future, and how and where services will be delivered and in what way, that kind of thing. So that's really the crucial piece of work. We need the funding model sorted so that we can pay the grant to ACAB for the next 2 years in order to get on and do that piece of work. And that's the end of my presentation. I'll take the report as read and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so I'll just take questions. Councillor Walker.
Entirely supportive of the funding. 2 questions. First off, around this model that is the 90 population, 10% deprivation, noting that many of the local boards have made comments around that in terms of other things like immigration and growth and all sorts of things that I would suggest are relevant. Would it be fair to say that deprivation at this point is a proxy, that conceivably we could come up with something better, but it's, I guess, the easiest thing to go for at this point? Would that be a fair comment?
Through you, Madam Chair. The original instruction to us was to look at equity and fairness, and also taking the Auckland Plan focus. There is, that does guide us to look to need, and there are a number of components to need, and when we do the next piece of work, we will look in a lot more detail at all of those. Some of that, I think a big piece of the work will be looking at what fairly sits in the central government sphere versus local government. So some of the things like immigration and that kind of thing.
So this next piece of work could generate some refinement, right? Fine. And then the other question I've got goes to a point that you're raising, and that is, would it be fair to say that the government and government agencies and departments are a significant, say, beneficiary of the Citizens Advice Bureau?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, definitely.
Yes is all I'm after. And further to that, Madam Chair, and I don't propose to speak now, but I would foreshadow an amendment, partly by way of a small substitution and then an addition that the officers have. Thank you.
A second. Let's just deal with this sensibly, because I think the issue, we'll get to it when we've had questions. So Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Newman, just questions at this stage.
Thank you. I was going to move, but that's fine. I think what we have just heard is the closest to Solomon that I have heard for a very, very long time. Can you confirm that this is really just a transit point in a journey?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, absolutely.
Can you confirm that the consultation you've done with ACAB and others, they understand that and they are supportive of where we are at the moment?
Yes.
And can you further confirm that the 200,000 we sought to put into the budget this time last year is in the baseline?
that's what we're asking.
Yep.
Yep.
So if the recommendations proceed, that it's in the baseline.
Yeah.
And lastly,
Yep.
that there will be no Citizens Advice Bureau that is worse off in terms of their funding from last time.
Yep, that's correct. Based on the retaining the 200,000, that's
Yeah,
correct.
so it was on that basis I was happy to move it. But I'd just like to, I don't need to speak later on, but I'd just like to thank them. This has been a very long process for a smallish amount of money in the scheme of council's budgets, but will achieve so much. So thank you very much.
Great questions of clarification. Thank you, Councillor. Very useful. Councillor Newman.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. I mean, look, I'm a fan of deprivation funding. Does your understanding of deprivation funding include recognition that with deprivation comes the likelihood of disengagement with services available? And if there is deprivation and disengagement from the services available in the bureaus, that actually there probably is latent demand for services, but it's not fully realised, and therefore it can't be fully quantified just using a determinant such as client usage. Can you comment on that?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, that's correct. I mean, there's a number of factors that that make it harder for deprived communities or communities of need to access services. Some of it is as simple as transport and disengagement, as you say, language. There's all sorts of things. But so yes, the latent demand is a big issue.
Chair, I don't need to speak later on, obviously. I'm a big winner out of this model, so I want to thank everyone in anticipation.
Questions? If not, any comments? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to speak also as a JP because a high percentage of the work done in CABs is the JP sitting in the office, not relating to any of the people there using the space. In my experience of why deprivation is important, I've sat in the Massey CAB, and also that it's important because I know the Rodney don't support this, but I have had many people from Rodney come to the Massey CAB to get JP work done. Many. Because I take their addresses because I have to record the work that I do. And so there's a bit of a mixed thing there that actually some of these hubs do support some of our rural communities because that's the service town they go to. And also they come across from Greenhithe as well because it's actually a bit closer and a bit more convenient for that. Now, in terms of deprivation, I think it's a good measure because in that same role, I sit at West City. We have a service desk. We're going much more out into the community now. Between me and one other JP, you can see over 50 people in a 2-hour period. And some of those things take quite a long time. So we are just constantly. And what I see in that community is a high number of immigrants, a high number of people who don't have as much education or wealth. They come to JPs and people like that because they can't afford to go to a lawyer to have all that sort of stuff done. Whereas when I go to the Northwest more, which is a different catchment, it is often Upper Harbour. It is Upper Harbour as well as it's just on the border of Upper Harbour and Henderson Massey. It's a lot slower, different clientele quite often. And so the need isn't so great when you have a more affluent community, which comes from Rodney, places like Kumeu, with the lifestyle blocks, etc. We know the demographics around Kumeu and Huapai, and West Harbour, Hobsonville, Whenuapai, quite different. And so you can see in a place where you have high deprivation, you get a lot more people coming to you. So I'm talking about JP stuff, but that's a lot of the work or the contacts that the CABs have, and it's great that they host that. They do it at a different time of the day. These service desks are in the night time when people who are working can come. But that's why I really support the deprivation, because I've seen it in practice. I've seen it playing out. The people that need the most help are often those people that are less well off and less connected. So I do support that model. I think it's really worthwhile. But you will also see that people from other areas will still access those sites, especially in places where you get an intersect of different local board areas which are quite different from each other. So I support this work. I wouldn't worry too much. I think it's. I know that a couple of, or one or two CABs think they're not getting a fair due, but you know, you've got to look at the numbers. You've got to look at actually the types of people that need the help that can't get it anywhere else. Thank you, Madam Chair. Or can't afford to get it anywhere else.
Okay, I've got Councillor Watson, Sayers, Councillor Casey, and I'll just, when Councillor Walker's back, we'll just have a chat about whatever amendment Councillor Walker was proposing. Councillor Watson.
I'm just a little curious then about when Councillor Walker's amendment's going up, because I might well want to talk to it, obviously. So, you know, it would be normal process for that to be up now, wouldn't it?
That's fine. I was just going to ask Councillor Walker when he came back if he wanted to speak to that.
Yes, please.
Okay, why don't we ask Councillor Walker to do that right now?
Okay, so two things there. One is the substitution of the word interim, and essentially that is reflecting what the officers have told us, that this model is going to be refined. I think that's important because we need to signal that, and I know that that would meet with the support of local boards, and I wouldn't doubt the Citizens Advice Bureau. So that's a pretty simple amendment. And then D goes to the question I asked that the officers answered in the affirmative, and that is that the government is a significant beneficiary of Citizens Advice Bureaus.
Sure is.
So I'll just read it. Approved staff completing analysis of the services that Citizens Advice Bureau provide that support and or substitute central government responsibilities. Now I'm happy for that to be added to or amended, but what I'm mindful of is if we're going to get better funding from government for Citizens Advice Bureau, and that might mean less funding on our part, we need to have the work done. So this is just directing the officers to do that, and I know that they're entirely supportive of that, I think.
Okay. Perhaps D could just be added anyway. I just need to clarify the interim model versus the model that we might be adopting as the basis on which to negotiate the future funding agreements with ACAB.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the model that we're proposing is for the next 2 years, and once we've done the network service provision, we would be coming back with a new proposal.
I think, so what Councillor Walker and Watson have done is clarify. I would suggest, if you're comfortable, Councillor Filipaina and Councillor Cooper, that we simply add D to the recommendations we've got and we add an interim. I think we're all saying the same thing, we've just got some more words.
Noting, Madam Chair, for me is the issue around a huge percentage of the actual activities in CABs is JPs, which is not related to that.
Exactly.
And a huge amount of the immigration stuff there is
Government.
sponsor forms, all of those, and we get questions about all of that as well. And I think that that's where, and I know there has been a little bit of money, but it's about training of JPs in a whole separate kind of work plan through the government and the Ministry of Justice.
Gripey. We've got, you're comfortable with that, Councillor Filipaina?
Comfortable, and I don't know, because even though I got UE English, I'm really confused of D. If we put a comma after provide, wouldn't it make it easier from my perspective, because they do the analysis that provide, and then therefore the analysis is going to give us everything that the COBs do to support and or substitute central government responsibilities. I just wanted to make it clear, totally agree about adding it, Councillor Walker. I just wanted to make sure that it's clear.
I took
so-
English, but I'm happy with
Okay.
Yeah.
We're in danger of a major agreement breaking out amongst all of us. Okay,
Because
cool.
I passed university.
Everyone's agreeing. That's wonderful. So I've got Councillor Watson, Sayers, Casey, and then Councillor Filipaina will close the debate. Councillor Watson. Oh, Councillor Collins. We'll pop Councillor Collins in before Councillor Filipaina. And Councillor Bartley. Okay. We'll rearrange it here, but Councillor Watson, your turn.
Okay, thanks, and I'm glad we clarified the matter of UE English, but depends if it was accredited or sat, because it was a lot harder sitting than it was to get it accredited, I can tell you that. I'm glad that that recommendation has been added, because the last thing I would want to come out of this is a sense of some of the affected CABs sort of feeling undervalued, and I know the officers have made a real effort to try and ensure no one's funding goes down, and that there is some sort of recognition of deprivation. Though interestingly enough, in their feedback, the CAB themselves, very idealistically, I think said that that they considered that there's a principle there of treating all people equally, and I think that's a very meritorious principle to adhere to. I'm certainly not for the slightest going to challenge the notion of deprivation, because we only have to go around parts of Auckland to see what the effects of that are, and how large numbers of our society, more so than now, start way behind the 8 ball. However, and this is why I'm glad D's been added, that does not capture the complexity of the CAB services, particularly those in high growth, high immigration areas like big chunks of the North Shore, where, and it's referenced in the report, where there's a complexity of interaction. You only have to get involved with some of these work or immigration related issues, and they are incredibly time consuming and difficult to deal with. Now, the masses of new immigrant populations are centering around big chunks of the North Shore, in both the North Shore ward and also in the Albany ward. So I really take my hat off to our CABs who have kind of laboured there heroically to deal with this tidal wave of interactions with these new people or clients, as they called here. And you only have to look at the statistics, both the online statistics and the walking off the street. And often what we find, particularly in Asian community, is that the word gets round that, this is where you should be going to, and you're not just dealing with one people, but you're dealing with a succession of people from the same family or from the same ethnic group. So I think it's really important then that this ongoing analysis that takes, in particular, the huge challenges of the North Shore CABs, just trying to keep their head above water, dealing with this specific type of clientele too. And I would add, when it comes to deprivation, the South and the West do not have the monopoly on deprivation, because we have any number of poor people in our communities that are as deprived as anyone in Auckland. So we suffer certainly in terms of youth centre facilities, in terms of central government support, because there's this misapprehension that places like the sunny Hibiscus Coast and the bays don't have any social problems. You've got a beach, so everyone must be happy and life sorted. That is not the case at all. There's real pockets of poverty and need that are the equal of anywhere, and if you wanted to, I could show you around there. So our CABs are dealing with that as well as this new immigrant tidal wave. So I'll leave it at that. I just want, and I'm sure our officers do, to make it very clear that in the the divvy up of the money, that that no one is worse off, but in my view, some of the CABs are not yet recognised for what the complexity of what they're confronting, and I hope that will be adjusted, because what I don't want to see is penny wise, pound foolish, where we lose the goodwill of these people who give up their time, and the service that they're doing, that the growing service, is somehow undercut by the relative crumbs off the table in terms of the council budget that they're asking for. So thank you.
Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I obviously have to consider the feedback that I've received from my own local board, the Rodney local board, and give that fair and due consideration. And I do want to congratulate the officers on the good work that you've done. I know it's been a lot of work and a lot of coercing of a number of parties, so well done there. However, I find myself in disagreement with my own local board, and I will therefore be supporting the recommendation. I also look forward to the continuing strong working relationship that's already been established with the council officers with CABX as well, and that's good to see. I also do support the amendment that's been put up there as well, so I'll also be voting in favour of that. And I also would like to reinforce Councillor Watson's point there about deprivation. And when I think of Rodney, immediately I would be thinking of the Helensville and Norwest areas in particular that really have deprivation and rely on their CAB to an enormous extent. Finally, I just would again like to acknowledge the positive attitude of the councillors, the council staff, the CAB and the CABX, and look forward to your next stage in this process, and I look forward to your reporting back to us in the future, so thank you.
Awesome, thanks Councillor. Councillor Casey.
Won't take long. Auckland's the first port of call for most of the migrants and refugees that come into New Zealand, and CAB has long been at the forefront of the first line really in servicing the needs of those migrants and refugees. And today, really, in supporting this funding decision, we're acknowledging that it's something that will be unanimously supported here, and we just thank you and the volunteers for the work you do. But more importantly, also recognise there was some frustration through this funding process. That's over now, so the word interim, forget that. We support you, and we always will. End of story. Full stop.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you to the staff, and I forgot to ask the question, so I've made it a statement in presenting a comment. But I remember I asked the question at the workshop around the monies that were being spent by the Māngere o Tahu local board, and that's all been included. So I think it's a real win for them that it's now part of the entire package for CAB. So thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this work. I just wanted to say that it's really good that we do this, and that we support the volunteers at the CAB. My experience has been that they go over and above to support their clients. I used to work for a government department, and that government department did fund CAB at a national level to provide consumer information. But it would be fair to say that a lot of government departments maybe overload and rely heavily on the Citizens Advice Bureau, which isn't commensurate with financial assistance. And also I wanted to pick up that for some CABs, they are very proactive in trying to reach out to different communities in what they provide. So just wanting to acknowledge, for instance, with CAB GI, they've got the food bank, CAB Onehunga, they're very proactive in terms of homelessness in the community. So Yeah, I do also acknowledge that more needs to be done by CABs, and it's not unreasonable for us to ask that they reach out more into those sectors where deprivation is very predominant. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I speak in support of the recommendations, but if you will allow me, I want to actually really speak in support of the staff, because they made a special time in their diary to see a number of councillors who had questions. Those questions were asked and answered one-on-one, and then they were followed up in writing. And that level of support to a councillor is really important. It's a great, in my opinion, a great display of professionalism from that team. So that's my comment. I do support the recommendations. They've come as a result of listening, consultation with the organisation, and I think that's really important as well. So for me, Madam Chair, it's a process that has got us to this point, and I think staff need a bit of a round of applause on that. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. And finally, Councillor Filipaina, who will close the debate.
Thank you, Chair. Support the comments about our staff, so congratulations. Also want to acknowledge your leadership in regards to this, Chair, right through this whole process, because it got a bit hairy in some of the other committee meetings. So your leadership in that is commended. So thank you so much for your leadership. I just wanted to sort of mention two things. One is the opportunity in regards to deprivation, is having a discussion. Later on, Councillor Walker asked the questions that I was going to ask around the conversation that we need to have at some stage based on, albeit 3 local boards around deprivation. So I look forward to that conversation with the funding or the budget right through to 2021, because it's only interim, as the people around the table have indicated. But I look forward to the conversation. Also, around the 200,000, I mean, obviously support, because the more that we do support our CABs, the better for our community again. It's a shame that the Māngere Otahuhu local board won't get the money they've already spent supporting the Otahuhu CAB, but it is what it is. And but I look forward to the fact that it's 12%, I think, in the report around the base funding for them. So thank you so much, and Chair, thank you. That's the last few words.
Kia ora, thank you. And just finally, before we put this, thank you staff, thank you to ACAB. This is one that was never going to have universal agreement, but I think it's a real victory for kind and thoughtful process, and that goes a long way. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Well done. Thank you so much. Yeah, it kind of feels like that.